Hi, I'm Kenny Anderson, Director of Multicultural Affairs for the City of Huntsville, and welcome to Impact. Each week we bring you information about exciting things that are happening right here in this community, and today will be no different. You know, one of my favorite things to do on this show is to talk with authors because I'm a big reader and I like learning. And I think that we're going to have a great conversation today with one of those people who's actually been on the broadcast before in a different capacity, but he's always welcome on Impact. Tim Allston, welcome back to the broadcast.
Kenny, thank you very, very much. Yes, and I like listening to authors too because you wrote a book in 1994.
Wow. You take us back when you say those kinds of things. You make me feel like an old guy.
Well, you were a child prodigy at the time.
Come back anytime.
Thank you very much. I'll get that statement notarized.
That'll be just fine. Listen, congratulations on this publication. It's called 7 Steps to Manage Ego Problems, a how-to guide for somebody else, written by Tim Allston. And I'm excited to find out all about what this is about. I know that you described yourself as a recovering egoholic. So let's start right there. What do you mean by that as an identity?
Well, Kenny, I've learned over time through painful experiences that I have an addiction problem. Never smoked, never drank, never got high, never gambled, never overate. But the addiction problem I have is actually the mother of addictions. It's actually older than planet Earth itself. My addiction has been to myself. I have been an egoholic, but thanks be to God, I am now recovering.
And so tell me what that means, because that, as you know, ego, of course, is the term I'm very familiar with as a mental health professional. I think that people are generally familiar with that term when they say somebody has a big ego. They're kind of probably imagining what that person is characteristically. But in terms of you describing that as the mother of all addictions, what impact did that have on your life, having this condition?
Well, if I took my cell phone out and did like this with it, what would you call that?
It's like you're taking a selfie.
A selfie. Well, the question is, who was the original selfie? And see, the issue is, if you go through the Bible narrative, it was the problem created in heaven, you know, with Lucifer, who later became Satan, because he was stuck on himself. He felt that he should have been the top dog. And ever since then, we've had those kinds of problems. But when I talk about egoholism, my definition is thinking too highly of yourself and or thinking too little of your God, and then acting excessively upon those impulses. Typically, when one thinks about ego, they think about the big ego. And those people drain us. But my book contends that we are as equally drained by people with little egos or little or no esteem. Both drain us. And so I am the poster child for one dealing with both big and little egos, so they both have affected me. As you know, as a mental health professional, ego is simply defined by every dictionary as the sense of self. Every person, every organization, every event, every activity, even Impact, this Impact show has an ego, has a sense of self. There's nothing wrong with an ego. The problem is, that I point out in my book, is when one gets excessive with it. When we get obsessive with a big ego, we call that arrogance, conceit, vanity. When we get obsessive with a little ego, we call that low or no self-esteem. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be able to put that information down on paper as a layperson and not as, in your case, a mental health professional.
Yeah, so perhaps when a person walks around with an inflated sense of self-importance and they kind of walk into a room and it's sort of like, here I am, I'm on the scene, do you know who I am, kind of an attitude when they're kind of interacting with people, there's this exaggerated sense of self. There are lots of ways that people might describe that, but it's also very typical, I think, many times in people's lives and experiences for those kinds of things to happen. Where does one draw the boundaries? Because on the one side, as again, a mental health professional, yes, I'm saying feel good about who you are, yes, you know, be proud of who you are, show some self-confidence, and exude those things that people will respect in you. They'll hire you because of that. They'll interact with you and engage with you because of that. But on the other hand, you got that person that borders on narcissism that people can't stand because they're so full of themselves. So how does one strike that balance and establish some boundaries?
Well, first of all, we can't do it on our own. And the narrative that I use is a narrative from the Bible. You know, when we were created perfect, but we're created perfect to align ourselves, connect ourselves with God. The problem happens is when we try to do everything on our own without his partnership. We don't know how much of ourselves to put in or how little of ourselves to put in. Only he knows the correct divine calibrations. So when we don't include him in things that we need to do, then we either put too much of ourselves in, which is the arrogance, or we put too little of ourselves in, which is the low self-esteem. And that's where the imbalance and that's where the excess comes in. So it really starts with our partnership with God.
So if a person who, and again, I'm the Multicultural Affairs Director, so I have to be fair to the public listening audience. There's some people who don't necessarily view God the way you do.
Exactly.
And so they may see what you're saying a little bit differently. And so for that person, is there room for them to also understand this whole notion of having an inflated ego that can be debilitating to a person's ability to be successful in school, successful in relationships, successful in careers? You've confessed, fired from 13 different jobs,
Yes.
40 plus years in the workforce and never having a promotion. You've talked about some things within your own experience that demonstrate, and I'm sure relationships too, that demonstrate this whole role of how ego's coexistence with real life can definitely be a problem. So how does one reconcile that?
Well, if one chooses not to believe the Bible narrative, then in one of my upcoming books, I talk about what are called truth tellers. Those are people, places, and activities that reveal us to us, often in a painful way. You and I both know that the number one truth teller in our lives are our wives. They kind of keep us in line. I mean, they kind of hold our feet to the fire. And many times we have to ask, is my ego getting in the way? And you and I both know what that answer is. But also the activities in which we're involved in reveal us to us. The things that we do or things that we don't do. So all around us, there are people and activities and organizations that have been telling us about ourselves, but we've been tuning them out because many times we're poor listeners.
Yeah. What about this whole notion of people who express things to oneself, express things to someone, and then the person has to look at themselves and say, is there some truth to that particular thing? You're talking about truth telling right now. What about those truth doubters, the people that feel like because you have an opinion or an idea about something that I'm doing, I don't necessarily have to embrace that. You don't know me as well as I know myself. How do you respond to that person? Because I think there's a huge element of egotism in that potentially will derail a person's ability to critically assess themselves and really kind of take into account what somebody has simply said to them as a point of reference.
For me, and I'm unapologetic about this, I keep going back to the Bible narrative. And therefore, I simply believe because God loves me and cares about me, that he allows or permits people and things to be in my path to reveal us to us. They're there for reasons. And so therefore I believe, sincerely believe, and it's been my practice and observation, that when people say things to us or don't say things to us, they help to show something in us because we know that we are imperfect and incomplete by our very nature. And so what they do is add to us to give us a certain level of equanimity. However, the first example, the best example is, to me, is God and the Bible. And you may not believe in the Bible as God's word of God, but in a business sense, you've got to believe in the Bible to me because according to the research, in the United States alone, a Bible is given, donated, or purchased every 1.7 seconds. So it is far outdistanced what color is your parachute, which sells 22,000 copies every month, or far outdistanced any of the books that were done about Harry Potter. So there are people who turn to this book either as a Bible, either as a biblical best practice, or for the sense of marketing. So what I suggest to people is look at the Bible. I mean, there are the truths in there, and look at it. Whether you choose to believe in God or not, that's another scenario. But look at it and use it as a mirror to say, is this me? I suspect, and I don't know, that the Holy Quran would probably do the same thing for those who choose to believe in and practice and read the Holy Quran. But all of us have truth tellers all around us. The question is, are we listening to them? Are we willing to listen? Are we willing to say there's something I don't know? My freshman year in college, my roommate said to me, he said, Tim, you're a good speaker, but you're a piss poor listener. And when you become a better listener, you'll become a better speaker. It took me 30 years, Kenny, to realize the fact that listening requires humility. You have to know that there's something I don't know, and if I stay quiet long enough, someone is going to give me that information to fill in that gap. I talk about that in step number 3.
Yeah. So who is this book targeting in terms of audience?
Well, it targets everyone that has an ego, a sense of self. So it's every person, every organization, every activity. But if there is a specific micro-targeted audience, it's an audience that no one has ever really addressed before. It is the audience that I consider to be the number one asset of every single organization in the world. What I learned in MBA school is that there are 3 kinds of resources: fiscal resources, physical resources, but the greatest resource is human resources. The greatest human resource are people. The greatest person in every organization, believe it or not, is not the CEO. It's the number 2 person. It's the person right in the number 2 position. I call them the silver medalists. These are the people that are the glue for the organization. Typically by title professionally, they are people whose first word in their title is either assistant, associate, deputy, or second. Provost sometimes, or COO. In a personal setting, that person is typically the wife, or the eldest, or in a single parent situation, it's the eldest child. These are the people who are the messengers between the top and the bottom. They're the ones who carry the messages. They have been at the bottom, so they understand the dynamics. They've also had to be at the top every now and then. But they're also the least acknowledged, least schooled, least identified, and most blamed people in the organization. That is the organization, that's the group to which I am targeting, because they're the ones who carry the messages up and down the line. So silver medalist is my primary audience.
So you chose to make this a downloadable ebook, and obviously you had a reason for that, but how can people get connected to that, and what would you hope to be the outcome of them connecting? Obviously, I know that you're a person of engagement, you're an interpersonal person, you like to get feedback and assess things. What mechanisms do you have beyond just a downloadable opportunity that people have to stay connected to people?
Well, I have made the book downloadable, and I made it free also. And the reason I've made it free is because, let's be honest, if Kenny Anderson wrote a book, you're a successful author, you're a successful academician, you're a successful mental health professional. If you were to write a book and to put a book on the market, people would buy that book because success is written all over Kenny Anderson. I'm a failure. I'm a serial failure, and nobody wants to buy a book about a failure. And so because it's a new concept, I offer the book free, and all one has to do is go to my website, www.getegohelpnow.com. And what is the intended outcome? My prayer, Kenny, is that no one who reads the book will ever have to write such a book themselves.
All right. So once again, the book is called 7 Steps to Manage Ego Problems, a how-to guide for somebody else. How'd you come up with that title?
Well, I started putting together what are the different components that I thought were going to be helpful to people. So I put together 7 steps. And I recognized the fact, too, in the subtitle, the how-to guide for somebody else, that no one will ever admit they have an ego problem. So therefore I say to people, then share it with somebody else. I say, however, so that you can be credible in sharing it with somebody else, read the book first so that you'll be able to be intelligent about it. Most people, when they read the book, say, ooh, you're talking about me. Because most people have the preconceived notion that ego problems are dealing with big egos, but we're dealing with big and little. And so that's what crafted the title of the book. And I look forward to the feedback from people because it's a new concept. I recognize the fact that a lot of people who read the book will probably never admit publicly that they read the book. If this book were written in the 19th century, you'd put it in a paper bag. You wouldn't see the book. But I really believe this book can help people do a lot of healing, both within their families, their jobs, their work environments. And I'm looking forward to the feedback.
All right. So again, if people want to get a copy of this free downloadable version of 7 Steps to Manage Ego Problems, a how-to guide for somebody else by Tim Allston, how would they do that?
They would simply go to the website, www.getegohelpnow.org, and you'll be available to download that copy free and read it and share it with people. It's a one-setting read. You can read the book in one setting.
All right. Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kenny.
All right. I want to thank you for being a part of our conversation as well, and we hope that you enjoyed all the information that we had to share. We hope that you also will take a look at the video that we just showed on our Facebook page, which is Impact with Kenny Anderson, where you can see some behind the scenes shots of what happens after the camera stops rolling. For Impact, I'm Kenny Anderson. Have a great day.